I think today we still have the sense that there's a border war. Now it's turned into a sports war between the University of Missouri and the University of Kansas, and I think tragically, as we, every time the teams play in the showdown at the Arrowhead Stadium or during basketball season, people start to talk about this. But in very simplistic terms. Good versus evil. You're bad. We're good. It's much more complex than that. Yeah, Missouri was much more complex than that. Missourians were not all pro-South. There were some Missourians who were pro-Union and who were, in fact, anti-slavery. Over on the other side of things, it's not like Kansas was some kind of racial utopia. Just a couple of years after the Civil War, Kansans vote again to deny black men the vote, women too. And we can't forget that Brown versus the Board of Education comes out of Topeka, Kansas. So it's much more complex than that. But I think that's why it's important that people try to understand it and to talk about it, and to really understand that here on this border between Missouri and Kansas, some really big issues. I mean, I would argue certainly the central issue of 19th century American history, but even of American history, this issue of slavery and freedom, this issue of race, it was all being discussed and, in fact, fought about on this border between these two states in a really, really dramatic way. And earlier than happened other places, people talked about it, but it didn't come to armed conflict until, in a large way, until Bleeding Kansas. But here were people that were living on what was the sort of fault line of America at that time, and they were coming to terms with it. They were having to live it, and I think that's important to understand, not only for American history, but also to again think about more modern wars. How do people confront a guerrilla insurgency? How do people come back together after conflict has occurred? I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned from this really interesting period in American history.